The darkness of space lit up with 300 ships appearing at once. They were massive, each one bigger than anything humanity had ever built. The Valkyrie Empire had arrived in Earth's solar system, and they came with a message that had worked on 847 other worlds. Captain Do-Yun stood on the bridge of his ship, the Indomitable, watching the enemy fleet form their attack pattern. He was 45 years old, with gray in his hair and scars from smaller battles with pirates and raiders. But this was different. This was an empire that had never lost a war. The message came through on all frequencies. Supreme War Master Thorvax's voice was cold and mechanical, translated by computers into every human language. You have 72 hours to surrender. Join the Valkyrie Empire peacefully, or we will take your world by force. This is your only warning. Do-Yun looked at his crew. They were scared. Everyone was scared. Earth's entire defense fleet had only 47 ships. The math was simple and terrible, but Do-Yun remembered something his grandfather told him about the old wars on Earth. Numbers don't always tell the whole story. Down in the science bay, Dr. Yuna was working fast. She was 29, brilliant, and supposed to make first contact with aliens when they arrived peacefully. Instead, she was analyzing battle records. The Galactic Council had sent humanity everything they knew about the Valkyrie. Every battle, every conquest, every victory, Yuna found something interesting. The Valkyrie won every first battle. They were perfect at it. Their tactics were flawless, but Yuna noticed they used the same tactics every time. Why change what always worked? The problem was that every species they fought was destroyed in that first battle. No one survived to make them adapt. Captain, Yuna called on the communication channel. I need to talk to you and Commander Ji-hoon right away. Commander Ji-hoon was in the tactical center running simulations. He was 34, the youngest fleet tactical officer in Earth's history. Every simulation showed the same result. Humanity lost. He ran it 1,000 times. 1,000 losses. When Yuna arrived, she brought her research. They're predictable, she said, showing them the patterns. Every battle starts the same way. They form a hammer and anvil formation. Heavy ships in front, fast ships on the sides. They crush the center and surround the edges. It works perfectly if you fight them the way they expect. Do-Yun leaned forward. So we don't fight them the way they expect. Ji-hoon started smiling. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who just realized the game might not be over. We run, we scatter. We make them chase us. They've never had to chase anyone before. The 72 hours passed too quickly. Earth's fleet moved to the Kuiper Belt, the outer edge of the solar system. Behind them, billions of people watched and waited. Some prayed. Some built weapons. Some wrote letters to loved ones. Everyone knew this might be the last day of human freedom. The Valkyrie came exactly on time. War Master Thorvax commanded from his flagship, a ship so large it had its own gravity. He had fought for 200 years. He had never lost. He would not lose today. Standard formation, Thorvax ordered. His ships moved into the hammer and anvil pattern. It was beautiful, like a dance of death they had performed 847 times before. Do-Yun gave his order. All ships execute scatter pattern delta, make them work for this. The human ships exploded in different directions. Not running away, but spreading out like seeds in the wind. The Valkyrie formation hit nothing but empty space. Their hammer struck air. Their anvil surrounded nothing. Thorvax was confused for exactly 3 seconds. Then he was angry. Reform and pursue. They cannot run forever. But humanity wasn't running. Small groups of human ships appeared behind Valkyrie vessels, fired everything they had, and disappeared again. They used the asteroids and ice chunks of the Kuiper Belt like cover, like buildings in a city. The Valkyrie had to break formation to chase them. Commander Ji-hoon watched his screens with total focus. Target their command ships first. If we can confuse their orders, they'll hesitate. His fingers flew across controls, sending new targets to every human captain. The battle lasted 6 hours. It felt like 6 years. Human ships were destroyed one by one. The Indomitable took 3 direct hits. Half the crew was dead or wounded. But they kept fighting. Lieutenant Sora flew her fighter through impossible spaces, dodging fire that should have killed her 10 times over. She was 27 and had trained her whole life for this. Her squadron followed her lead, striking and vanishing like ghosts. When it was over, 12 human ships were gone. 12 crews lost, but 31 Valkyrie ships were destroyed. 31 ships from an empire that thought it couldn't be touched. The remaining human ships pulled back, damaged and bleeding. The Valkyrie fleet stopped pursuing. On his bridge, War Master Thorvax stared at the numbers. He had lost 31 ships. In 200 years, he had never lost more than 5 in a single battle. This was impossible. War Master, his second officer said carefully, should we request reinforcements? Thorvax wanted to say no. He wanted to say he didn't need help with one primitive species. But he looked at the debris field, at the burning wrecks of ships that were supposed to be invincible. Send the request. Bring 400 more ships. We will overwhelm them with pure numbers. On the Indomitable, Do-Yun looked at his surviving crew. They were exhausted. They were wounded. But they were alive, and they had done something no other species had done. They had hurt the Valkyrie Empire. We just showed them something, Do-Yun said to his bridge crew. We showed them they can bleed. That's more than anyone else ever did. Dr. Yuno was already back in her lab, studying data from the battle. They had learned so much. Weaknesses in Valkyrie shields, patterns in their targeting systems, ways to exploit their reliance on formation tactics. The war had just begun, and humanity had already changed it. The Valkyrie came expecting a quick victory, a 72-hour conquest like all the others. Instead, they got a real fight. They got humanity. Across Earth, people celebrated and mourned at the same time. They had lost friends, family, heroes, but they had won something more important than a battle. They had one hope. If 35 human ships could destroy 31 Valkyrie vessels, then maybe, just maybe, humanity had a chance. In the darkness between stars, the message spread. Other species, conquered and broken by the Valkyrie, heard the news. Humanity survived the first battle. It was impossible, but it happened. Some of them began to wonder, if humans could do it, could they? The Valkyrie Empire had been unstoppable for 2 centuries. They thought nothing could challenge them. Then humanity appeared and everything changed. 3 weeks passed since the first battle. Earth's shipyards worked day and night, building new vessels and repairing damaged ones. The Indomitable spent 2 weeks in dock, getting fixed. Captain Do-Yun used that time to train his crew and plan for what was coming, because everyone knew the Valkyrie would return. The only question was when. Engineer Minho worked in a secret facility on Mars. He was 38 years old and had spent his whole career building mining equipment. Now he was taking apart Valkyrie technology from the destroyed ships. Humanity had recovered pieces from the debris field, and Minho was learning everything he could. Their shields work on a specific frequency, he explained to a group of military officers. They're stronger than ours, but they're predictable. If we can build weapons that match and disrupt that frequency, we can hurt them more efficiently. The officers approved his project. Within days, Minho had teams working around the clock. They didn't have time to build better technology. They just needed to build different technology. Something the Valkyrie wouldn't expect. Specialist Hana was 25 and had been a civilian programmer before the war. Now she worked in electronic warfare, studying how Valkyrie ships communicated. She found something fascinating. The Valkyrie used encrypted channels, but they never changed their encryption. Why would they? No one had ever broken it. Hana didn't try to break it. Instead, she found a way to flood their communication channels with random data. Garbage information that their systems would try to process. It wouldn't break their communications, but it would slow them down. Maybe even confuse them. Lieutenant Sora was back in her fighter, training new pilots. After the first battle, thousands of volunteers wanted to join the fighter squadrons. Sora's squadron had lost 6 pilots and she felt every loss. But she couldn't stop. She had to train these new recruits to survive. "The Valkyrie fly in perfect formation," she told them. "They're beautiful to watch. But formation flying is predictable. We fly chaotic. We make them guess. We make them choose between targets. Chaos is our friend." When the Valkyrie returned, they came with 400 ships. War Master Thorvax was not making mistakes this time. He would crush humanity with overwhelming force and perfect tactics. He studied the first battle, saw where things went wrong, and adjusted his strategy slightly. The second battle began near Jupiter. The massive planet's gravity made a good anchor point for human defenses. Captain Doyun commanded the defense from his repaired ship. Beside him were 33 surviving ships from the first battle and 22 new vessels. 55 ships against 400. "They're adapting," Commander Jihoon observed, watching the Valkyrie approach. "Different formation this time. They learned from last time." Doyun smiled grimly. "Good, so did we." The Valkyrie came in waves, trying to overwhelm specific sections of the human line. It was a sound strategy. It should have worked. But Engineer Minho's new weapons tore through Valkyrie shields like paper. Not every time, but enough times to matter. The battle became chaos. Human ships used Jupiter's moons as cover, firing from behind rocky satellites. Sora's fighter squadrons came from above and below, attacking from angles the Valkyrie didn't expect. In space, there was no up or down, but most species still thought in those terms. Humans had learned to think in 3 dimensions plus time. Then Specialist Hannah activated her electronic warfare suite. Valkyrie communications suddenly filled with garbage data. Their carefully coordinated attacks began to fall apart. Ships received conflicting orders. Some Valkyrie vessels, trying to target human ships in the confusion, accidentally locked onto their own allies. 3 Valkyrie ships destroyed each other before War Master Thorvax realized what was happening. He ordered communications to be restricted, but the damage was done. His fleet was rattled. The battle lasted 14 hours. It was brutal. Human ships were destroyed one after another. The Indomitable took so much damage that half the decks were exposed to vacuum. But they kept fighting. Engineer Minho watched from Mars as his weapons proved their worth. Every time a Valkyrie shield flickered and failed, he felt grim satisfaction. They weren't winning, but they were surviving. That was enough. When the shooting finally stopped, 18 human ships were gone. Heroes lost. Friends dead. But 127 Valkyrie ships were destroyed. 127. The number shocked everyone. War Master Thorvax sat in his command chair, staring at the casualty reports. In 2 battles, he had lost over 150 ships. The entire conquest of the previous 50 species had cost him less than that. This was wrong. This was impossible. "Request more reinforcements," he said quietly. His officers looked at each other. The great War Master Thorvax admitting he needed help, but they sent the message. Across the galaxy, other species heard the news. The Valkyrie had attacked Earth again with 4 times their original force, and they had lost again. Not completely, but enough to matter. Humanity was down to 37 ships, but they were still fighting on a conquered world 300 light-years away. A resistance leader named Krell watched the news feeds. His people had surrendered to the Valkyrie 10 years ago. They had thought resistance was hopeless. Now he saw humans fighting with 37 ships against 400 and surviving. Krell began to think. If humans could do it, maybe others could too. He started making calls to old friends, old fighters who had given up. Maybe it was time to try again. The Galactic Council held an emergency session. The Valkyrie Empire had been the dominant power for 2 centuries. Now, species with primitive technology was making them bleed. What did this mean for galactic politics? Some council members began secretly sending information to Earth, Valkyrie supply routes, weaknesses in their conquered systems. Not open support, but quiet help. If humanity could actually win, the entire galaxy would change. Dr. Yuna received this intelligence and spent days analyzing it. She was exhausted, running on coffee and determination, but she found patterns. The Valkyrie Empire was massive, but it was overstretched. They controlled so many systems that they couldn't defend them all at once. "We need to think bigger," she told Admiral Taiwan during a secure conference. Taiwan was 52, newly promoted to Supreme Commander of Earth's forces. "The Valkyrie think this is just about Earth. We need to make it about their entire empire." Taiwan understood immediately. "We take the fight to them." Back on the Valkyrie flagship, Thorvax received his reinforcements. Another 500 ships were coming. With his remaining vessels, he would have over 700 ships. Surely that would be enough. Surely these humans couldn't survive that, but doubt had entered his mind. Doubt was new and uncomfortable. In 200 years, he had never doubted. Now he couldn't stop doubting. What if 700 ships weren't enough? What if these humans were different from every other species he had conquered? He pushed the doubt away and began planning. The third attack would be different. He would learn from his mistakes. He would adapt. The Valkyrie could adapt too, but adaptation was humanity's specialty. And Earth had 6 months to prepare before the next attack. 6 months to build ships, train crews, and plan something the Valkyrie would never expect. The war was far from over. The galaxy watched and waited. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, other conquered species began sharpening their weapons and remembering what freedom felt like. 6 months changed everything. Admiral Taiwan looked at his fleet and saw 73 ships. Some were military vessels, fast and deadly. Others were converted civilian ships with weapons bolted to their hulls. It wasn't enough to match the Valkyrie, but it was enough to fight. Taiwan was 52 years old and had fought in 3 wars before the Valkyrie came. He knew how to fight when outnumbered. The trick was not fighting where the enemy expected. Don't defend. Attack. "We're taking the fight to their territory," he announced at the War Council. The other admirals looked shocked. Earth's orbital defenses were strong now. Why abandon them? "Because they expect us to defend Earth," Taiwan explained. "They'll bring everything here. But if we're hitting their supply lines and freeing their conquered worlds, they'll have to split their forces. We make this expensive for them." Meanwhile, Agent Jiwoo was already behind enemy lines. She was 31, trained in intelligence work, and currently on a conquered world called Tarvos. The Valkyrie had taken this planet 8 years ago. The people there, the Tarvosians, had given up fighting. Jiwoo met with resistance leaders in secret. They were scared, broken people who had forgotten what hope looked like. She showed them data from Earth's battles. Showed them that the mighty Valkyrie could be hurt. "If we can fight them, you can too," Jiwoo said simply. "We're just humans, we're not special. We just refuse to give up." A Tarvosian named Krell looked at the battle data. "You destroyed over 100 ships?" 158, last count, Jiwoo corrected. "And we're still fighting." Something changed in Krell's eyes. Something that had been dead for 8 years came back to life. Hope. Within weeks. The Tarvosian resistance began hitting Valkyrie supply depots, small attacks at first, testing their strength. The Valkyrie garrison was confused. These people had been peaceful for years. What changed? On Earth, Medic Hyjin worked in a facility housing Valkyrie prisoners. She was 28 and had volunteered to treat wounded enemy soldiers. Some people called her a traitor. She called it doing her job. She talked to the prisoners while treating their injuries. Most wouldn't speak to her. But one young Valkyrie soldier, barely old enough to fight, asked her a question. "Why do you fight so hard? Your world is just one planet. The Empire has thousands." Hyjin thought about it while bandaging his arm. "Because it's our planet, our home." "Would you stop fighting if someone tried to take your home?" The soldier looked confused. "We fight for the Empire, for glory and conquest, not for home." That conversation stayed with Hyjin. She reported it to Dr. Yuna, who found it fascinating. The Valkyrie fought for victory, but humans fought for survival. For home, for each other. That was the difference. The third major battle happened not at Earth, but at a Valkyrie supply station orbiting a gas giant in their territory. Admiral Taiwan brought 30 ships and hit them fast. The station had defenses, but they were designed to stop rebellious locals. Not a coordinated military strike. The station burned. Thousands of tons of supplies, weapons, and fuel were destroyed. The Valkyrie garrison sent distress signals. War Master Thorvax had to divert ships to respond. Ships he had planned to use attacking Earth, more attacks followed. Human ships appeared at conquered worlds, delivered weapons to resistance fighters, and vanished before the Valkyrie could respond. Agent Jiwoo coordinated these operations, building a network of rebels across dozens of systems. The Valkyrie Empire, which had been expanding for 2 centuries, suddenly had to deal with internal problems. Rebellions erupted on 7 worlds. Then 15, then 30. Species that had surrendered decades ago remembered how to fight. War Master Thorvax was losing control. His superiors in the Valkyrie High Command demanded answers. How could one primitive species cause this much chaos? It's not just humans, Thorvax tried to explain. They're inspiring others. They're giving hope to our conquered worlds. The High Command didn't want to hear excuses. They sent their best, the Void Legion. 100 ships crewed by elite warriors, the finest the Empire had. These were veterans who had fought for centuries. They would end this. Commander Seung-ho was 41 and commanded Earth's defense of the home system. He knew the Void Legion was coming. Intelligence reports were clear. This would be the real test. They're sending their best, he told his captains. That means we've scared them. Good. Let's make sure they stay scared. But Seung-ho knew the truth. The Void Legion wasn't just good, they were perfect. Disciplined, experienced, equipped with the best technology. If humanity lost this battle, they lost everything. Scientist Nari had been studying Earth's sun, Sol, for months. She was 33 and had made a career studying stellar phenomena. Now she was looking for a weapon. She found it in Sol's unusual magnetic field. The sun had powerful magnetic storms, stronger than most stars. Nari discovered they could be triggered artificially. The result would be a massive electromagnetic pulse that would disable every electronic system in the inner solar system. Including our ships, Admiral Taiwan said when she presented the plan. Yes, Nari admitted, but we can prepare manual backups. Analog controls, old technology that doesn't need computers. The Valkyrie rely completely on their advanced systems. If we can survive 17 minutes without electronics, we can destroy them while they're helpless. It was insane, it was desperate. It was very human. Taewon approved the plan. Volunteer Junho was 23 years old and had spent his life flying cargo ships between Earth and Mars. When the call went out for civilian volunteers, he didn't hesitate. His cargo hauler, the Steady Hand, wasn't a warship, but it had engines and he could bolt weapons to it. Thousands like him answered the call. Miners, traders, transport pilots. They came to defend Earth with whatever they had. The Valkyrie had never seen anything like it. In their empire, civilians didn't fight. That was for soldiers. The Void Legion arrived with confidence. They saw a ragtag human fleet and knew victory was certain. They formed their perfect battle formation and began their assault. Then every civilian ship launched. The military fleet of 73 ships suddenly became over 200 vessels. Mining ships, cargo haulers, even a few luxury yachts with improvised weapons. All of them flying toward the Void Legion. The Valkyrie were stunned. This wasn't military doctrine. This was chaos. This was madness. This was humanity. Commander Sumo gave the order. All ships, engage. Show them what we fight for. The battle raged through Earth's inner solar system. Ships exploded, people died. The Void Legion was everything the reports said. Skilled, deadly, merciless. Human ships fell one by one, but they kept coming. For every ship destroyed, 2 more took its place. Civilian pilots who had never fired a weapon in their lives now flew at veteran warriors without hesitation. Volunteer Junho's cargo hauler took 3 hits. His shields were failing, his weapons were nearly gone. But he kept flying, kept shooting, because behind him was Earth, behind him was home. After 31 hours of continuous battle, scientist Nari activated her weapon. The sun erupted in a massive magnetic storm. The pulse swept through the system like a wave. Every ship went dark, human and Valkyrie both. Floating dead in space, no power, no weapons, no navigation. Just silent metal coffins waiting to see who would recover first. 17 minutes felt like 17 years. Human crews worked frantically with manual controls, analog systems, things that didn't need computers. It was clumsy and slow, but it worked. The Valkyrie ships stayed dark. Their systems were too advanced, too dependent on technology. They had no manual backups because they had never needed them. For 17 minutes, human gunners manually aimed their weapons and fired. The Void Legion, the elite of the Valkyrie Empire, died helplessly in the dark. When systems rebooted, only 23 Valkyrie ships remained functional. The rest were destroyed or crippled beyond repair. The Void Legion was broken. War Master Thorvax's flagship was one of the survivors. He sat in his command chair, looking at the destruction, his elite forces. His best warriors, gone. He did something no Valkyrie commander had done in 847 conquests. He opened the channel to the human fleet. We surrender. The word surrender echoed through every human ship. Nobody moved for a moment. After all the fighting, all the dying, all the impossible odds, the Valkyrie were giving up. Admiral Taiwan was the first to respond. All ships, cease fire. I repeat, cease fire. He opened the channel to Thorvax's flagship. Your surrender is accepted. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. On the Valkyrie flagship, War Master Thorvax felt shame for the first time in 200 years. His officers looked at him with disbelief. The great Thorvax had surrendered. The unthinkable had happened, but Thorvax was a realist. His Void Legion was destroyed. His supply lines were cut. Rebellions burned across the empire. He had lost not because humans were stronger, but because they refused to fight the way he expected. They adapted, they surprised him. They sacrificed in ways he couldn't understand. The news of the surrender spread across the galaxy in hours. The Valkyrie Empire, invincible for 2 centuries, had been stopped by humanity. Species that had given up hope suddenly felt it return. If humans could do it, maybe freedom was possible after all. On Tarvos, Agent Jiwoo received the message and immediately shared it with Krell and his resistance. The Tarvosians erupted in celebration. Within days, they drove the remaining Valkyrie garrison off their world. They were free again. Similar stories played out on dozens of conquered worlds. The Valkyrie military began pulling back, trying to consolidate their remaining forces. The Empire was fracturing. Earth celebrated, but Captain Do-Yun knew the truth. They had won the battle, but the war wasn't over. The Valkyrie High Command still controlled thousands of ships and hundreds of systems. If they regrouped, if they learned from their mistakes, they could come back stronger. We need to push our advantage, Do-Yun told the War Council. We need to make sure they can never threaten us again. Dr. Yuna agreed, but not through conquest. We're not the Valkyrie. We don't want to rule anyone, we want peace. Admiral Taiwan nodded. Then we negotiate. We make them agree to terms that prevent future aggression. We help the liberated worlds establish their own governments. We build a coalition, not an empire. The negotiations began on neutral ground, a space station run by the Galactic Council. War Master Thorvax represented the Valkyrie, though his authority was slipping. The High Command had stripped him of his rank. He was just Thorvax now, a disgraced commander. Dr. Yuna led the human delegation. She sat across from Thorvax and saw something in his eyes. Not hatred, not anger, understanding. Why did you surrender? She asked him privately before the formal negotiations began. Thorvax was quiet for a moment. Because I finally understood what we were fighting. We fought for victory, for conquest, for empire. You fought for survival, for home, for each other. That gave you a strength we couldn't match. Every human knew exactly what they were fighting for. Most Valkyrie didn't even know why we were conquering anymore. We did it because it's what we did. The formal negotiations lasted 3 months. The terms were harsh for the Valkyrie, but fair. All conquered worlds would be freed. The Valkyrie military would be reduced to defensive forces only. War reparations would be paid. Technology and knowledge would be shared to help rebuilding. The Valkyrie High Command tried to reject the terms. They still had ships. They could fight on. But something unexpected happened. The Valkyrie people themselves began demanding peace. Soldiers refused orders, crews abandoned ships. The common Valkyrie citizen was tired of endless war. The empire collapsed from within. Not through conquest, but through its own people choosing something different. Commander Ji-hoon was part of the team, helping liberated worlds establish defenses. He taught them the tactics that had worked for humanity. But more importantly, he taught them the philosophy. Don't try to match enemy strength with strength, he explained to a class of alien officers. Find your advantages. Use them, adapt constantly. Make the enemy react to you instead of you reacting to them. One student, a Tarvosian, raised a hand. But what if we're not as creative as humans? What if we can't adapt like you? Ji-hoon smiled. You already are creative. You survived under Valkyrie rule. You kept your culture alive. That took adaptation. That took creativity. You just need to apply it to military thinking. Lieutenant Sora became a symbol of human courage across the galaxy. Her fighter squadron had destroyed 47 enemy ships during the war. She was offered positions, medals, fame. She turned most of it down. I just did my job, she said in an interview that was broadcast across 100 worlds. Everyone did. That's what humans do. When something needs doing, we do it. We don't think about whether it's impossible. We think about what needs to happen, and we make it happen. That interview was studied in military academies for generations. The idea of ordinary people doing extraordinary things became known as the human factor. Engineer Minho went back to building civilian technology, but his wartime innovations had applications in many fields. His frequency disruption technology, designed to break Valkyrie shields, could also be used to improve power generation and medical scanners. War technology became peace technology, specialist. Hannah became famous in communication circles for her electronic warfare techniques. She wrote a manual called Fighting in the Information Space that became required reading for anyone working in military communications. But her favorite work was designing better, more secure communication systems for civilian use. Agent Jiwoo continued her intelligence work, but now she focused on preventing conflicts instead of fighting them. She helped establish an early warning system to detect aggressive empires before they became too powerful. Her networks of contacts across the galaxy became the foundation for better diplomatic communication. Medic Hyjin's conversations with Valkyrie prisoners led to a breakthrough in cross-species medical understanding. She established the first interspecies medical exchange program. Doctors from dozens of worlds learned from each other, saving lives and building connections that made future wars less likely. Commander Seung-ho took command of Earth's new defensive fleet. Not to conquer, but to protect? His philosophy was simple. We don't want to fight anyone. But if someone threatens us or our allies, we'll be ready. Under his command, Earth's military became a training ground for other species. The Galactic Defense Coalition was formed, with humanity as a founding member alongside dozens of liberated worlds. Scientist Nari continued studying stellar phenomena, now with resources and cooperation from across the galaxy. Her solar weapon was never used again, and she made sure the technology was locked away. Some weapons were too dangerous to exist. Volunteer Jinho returned to cargo hauling, but he was different now. He had seen war. He had fought alongside military pilots and survived. His cargo ship, the Steady Hand, was repaired, and he painted a memorial on its hull, the names of 42 civilian volunteers who didn't make it home. Across the galaxy, the balance of power had shifted. The Valkyrie Empire became the Valkyrie Federation, a loose collection of systems governed by their own people. Other species that had been preparing for conquest reconsidered. Humanity had shown that aggression wasn't always profitable. But the most important change was invisible. It was a change in thinking. For 2 centuries, species had believed that might made right, that the strong would always conquer the weak. Humanity proved that determination, creativity, and fighting for something greater than victory could overcome any advantage. Captain Do-yeon, now retired from active service, watched Earth from an observation deck. His ship, the Indomitable, was being converted into a museum. Young cadets would learn about the war there, would see the scarred hull and bullet-marked walls. A young officer approached him. "Captain Doyan, I wanted to thank you. My parents are from Tarvos. If you hadn't fought, they'd still be enslaved." Doyan shook the young alien's hand. "We didn't fight alone. Your people fought too. Everyone who resisted, everyone who refused to give up, they all won this war together." That was the truth humanity wanted the galaxy to remember. They didn't win alone. They won because they inspired others. Because they showed that resistance was possible. Because they refused to accept that anything was truly unstoppable. The Velkari had thought nothing could stop them. They were wrong. Not because humanity was invincible, but because humanity simply refused to quit. 50 years after the war ended, Earth had changed. The blue planet that once stood alone now led a coalition of free worlds. Humanity's greatest export wasn't technology or weapons. It was hope. Admiral Taiwan, now 92 years old, stood before a gathering of students from 30 different species. They came to Earth to study at the new Galactic Defense Academy. He was their guest speaker, one of the last living commanders from the war. "You want to know how we won?" Taiwan said to the young faces watching him. "You think there's a secret? A special tactic? Some human advantage you can learn and copy?" He paused, letting them wait for the answer. "The truth is simpler and harder than that. We won because we refused to lose. We were outnumbered, we were outgunned. We should have been destroyed in the first week. But we kept fighting because behind us was everything we loved. That's not a tactic. That's purpose." Dr. Yuna, now a senior member of the Galactic Council, spent her days working on peaceful cooperation between species. The battles she fought now were diplomatic ones. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges, preventing the small disputes that could become big wars. She had written a book called Why Humanity Survived that was read across the galaxy. In it, she explained that humanity's victory wasn't about being special. It was about being stubborn, creative, and unwilling to accept defeat. Those were traits any species could develop. The Velkari Federation had become a productive member of the galactic community. They focused on technology and trade now instead of conquest. Some Velkari even joined the Galactic Defense Coalition, using their military experience to protect others instead of oppressing them. Former War Master Thorvax, now simply called Thorvax, had written his own book, The Last Empire, described his experiences and the lessons he learned. He traveled to liberated worlds and spoke about how conquest corrupts and how peace enriches. Some hated him. Others forgave him. All listened. In one memorable speech, Thorvax said something that echoed across the galaxy. "We didn't lose because humans were stronger. We lost because we forgot why we were fighting. We conquered because we could, not because we should. Humanity fought for home, for family, for freedom. That made all the difference." Commander Jihoon, now retired, ran a tactical academy where officers from dozens of species learned adaptive warfare. His students called him the teacher who made thinking dangerous. He taught them that the greatest weapon wasn't a gun or a ship. It was a mind that refused to stop looking for solutions. One of his students once asked, "What if we face an enemy that's adapted to human tactics?" Jihoon smiled. "Then adapt again. That's the lesson. Never stop evolving. Never become predictable. The moment you think you've found the perfect strategy is the moment you've lost." Lieutenant Sora became humanity's first ambassador to the Galactic Defense Coalition. She was responsible for coordinating defense strategies across allied worlds. Her philosophy was simple: we don't want to fight. But if someone threatens any member of the coalition, they threaten all of us. Under her leadership, the coalition grew to include 127 member worlds. Not an empire, but an alliance of free species choosing to stand together. The Velkari had conquered by force. Humanity, led by example. Engineer Minho's inventions had transformed civilian life across the galaxy. Better power systems, faster communication, medical devices that saved millions of lives. He rarely talked about the war, preferring to focus on building rather than destroying, but he kept one thing from those days: the first weapon prototype he built. It sat in his office as a reminder. This saved lives by taking them, he told visitors. I'm proud of what it did, but I never want to build something like it again. Specialist Hannah worked on the Galactic Communication Network, a system that connected every member world with instant, secure communication. The technology that once jammed enemy signals now brought the galaxy closer together. She also helped develop educational programs that taught digital literacy to species just entering the space age. Information should be free, she often said. Keeping secrets breeds conflict. Sharing knowledge breeds peace. Agent Jiwoo had become a legend in intelligence circles, though few knew her real name. She built a network that prevented 3 potential wars through early detection and diplomatic intervention. Her philosophy was that the best intelligence work was work that prevented problems rather than solved them. She trained a new generation of agents across the galaxy. Your job isn't to spy, she told them. Your job is to understand. Understand why conflicts start. Understand what people need. Understanding prevents wars better than any weapon. Medic Hygien's interspecies medical program had saved countless lives. Diseases that plagued one species were cured by research from another. Medical techniques developed for one biology helped others. The program became one of the great success stories of galactic cooperation. She was nominated for the Galactic Peace Prize but turned it down. Give it to the doctors who do the work every day, she said. I just started a program. They're the ones saving lives. Commander Seung-ho remained in military service longer than most, finally retiring at 75. Earth's defensive fleet under his command never fired a shot in anger. That was his proudest achievement. The best military, he said, is one that never has to fight. Scientist Nari made breakthrough discoveries in stellar mechanics that revolutionized energy production. The weapon she created to win the war led to peaceful technology that powered 100 worlds. She always said this proved her point. Any technology could be used for good or harm. The choice was what mattered. Volunteer Junho, now 73, still flew cargo between worlds. His ship, the Steady Hand, had been repaired so many times it was barely original anymore. But the memorial on its hull remained pristine. 42 names. 42 civilians who fought because it needed doing. Young pilots often asked him what the war was like. He told them the truth. It was terrifying. People died. Friends were lost. But we did what needed doing. That's all. When your home is threatened, you fight. It's not complicated. Captain Do-Yun passed away peacefully at age 95, surrounded by family. His funeral was attended by representatives from 83 worlds. The Indomitable, now a museum ship, was towed past Earth one final time in his honor. Millions watched and remembered at his funeral. They read his last message. We fought not because we wanted war, but because we wanted peace. We stood not because we were fearless, but because we were terrified and stood anyway. We won not because we were better, but because we refused to give up. That's the human way. May it inspire others to stand when their time comes. Monuments to the war stood on every world that fought for freedom. On Earth, Mars, Tarvos, and dozens of other planets. They all carried the same inscription in hundreds of languages. They thought nothing could stop them. Then humanity appeared. Not because humans were invincible, but because humans refused to surrender. May all free beings remember, tyranny falls not to superior force but to unbreakable spirit. The galaxy had changed in 50 years. No new empires rose to replace the Valkyrie. Some species tried, but they found resistance immediately. The lesson had been learned. Conquest was no longer profitable. Cooperation was the new currency of power. Children across the galaxy grew up hearing stories of the war. How a small species, with primitive technology, stood against an empire and won. How they inspired others to fight for freedom. How they built peace after victory instead of a new empire. The humans in those stories were heroes, but the humans themselves insisted they were ordinary. That was perhaps their greatest gift to the galaxy, proving that ordinary beings could do extraordinary things when fighting for something worth fighting for. Earth thrived as part of the galactic community. Human ships explored distant stars. Human scientists worked with alien researchers. Human artists shared their culture with beings from across the galaxy. Humanity took its place not as conquerors or rulers, but as partners. One day, a young student from a species that hadn't been discovered during the war asked Dr. Yuna a question. What made humans special? Why could you do what others couldn't? Yuna thought about all the battles, all the sacrifices, all the impossible victories. She thought about the people she knew who fought and died. She thought about what made them stand when others fell. We're not special, she said finally. That's what you need to understand. We're not stronger or smarter or better. We're just stubborn. We adapt, we refuse to quit. And most importantly, we fight for each other, not just for ourselves. Any species can do that. The Valkyrie couldn't stop us because they didn't understand that. They fought for empire. We fought for home. The student nodded, understanding. So anyone can do what humans did? Anyone, Yuna confirmed. That's the whole point. The galaxy doesn't need more humans. It needs more species willing to stand up for what matters, willing to adapt and fight and never surrender their freedom. That's the real lesson of the war. 50 years after the war, the galaxy was at peace. Not because war was impossible, but because the price of aggression was too high. Species remembered what happened to the Valkyrie. They remembered that even the mightiest empire could fall if they underestimated the determination of free beings.